the UFC is back for 2024, and we're starting off with a UFC Apex card. I mean, you know, we go 4 weeks without UFC, and this is what we get. We get rewarded by watching an Apex card, but it's fine. UFC's back. All is well. Johnny Walker and Magomed Ankalaev in the main event now. Again, I am still in... I'll be back to the normal setup next week. Like, just rest assured we'll be fine next week for Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland in the main event over in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We'll have the normal setup. I'll have the graphics on the screen. Again, this is the final video without the actual graphics on the screen. So let's get into it. Starting off the UFC here in 2024. Folks, if you haven't yet, though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. Again, going to try to upload a lot more to the channel here in the year of 2024. And we started off, of course, with this video right here with Magomed Ankalaev and Johnny Walker, their rematch of their original fight earlier, or last year, I guess now in 2023, kicking off 2024 with this main event in the UFC Apex. So 12 fights on this card. We start at first here. Felipe Bunes taking on Josh Van. It's an interesting fight here in the flyweight division because Bunes is a guy who is coming into the promotion. He, you know, I knew him for his loss to Jussier Formiga. Formiga made a little run trying to come back after the UFC dropped him in 2022. Formiga came back, won a fight against Felipe Bunes in LFA. He wins the fight by rear naked choke in the second round. He misses weight in that fight, but he still wins. So that's kind of how I knew Bunes. That was in the main event of LFA 124. After that, he comes back. He wins 2 fights in a row. The second one being a win in January of 2023 for the LFA Flyweight Championship. He wins it by knockout in the first round. He beats Horuchi, who's a guy who's 10-5 at the time. Bunes, though, if you look at him, last 7 fights, he's 3-4. You look back, starting in 2019, 3 straight losses over in the ACA promotion over there, of course, in Russia, wins another one in ACA, finally wins a fight in ACA, drops the fight to Formiga, wins 2 in a row, of course, the second one resulting in a LFA championship. But it is interesting, Bunes is a guy who is known for his knockouts. He is known for the power that he does possess. He does have the, he's known for his jiu-jitsu. He does have power, though, as you saw in his last fight, winning that LFA championship. But again, it likely will be the grappling that does win him fights. Again, I have seen him, you know, the one fight that sticks out for me other than that win for the LFA championship is that loss to Formiga, where Formiga was able to take his back and submit him. But Bunes is getting a tough opponent in this one in Josh Van. Van's a guy who's 2-0 in the UFC. Just fought recently back at UFC 295 on the Prochazka Ferreira card. He goes in there and beats Kevin Borjas by unanimous decision. And Van is a guy who's going to stay very active in the octagon. He is going to go for it for 15 minutes straight. The guy's conditioning is great, his cardio is great, and his pacing is great as well. You saw it in his first fight in the UFC where he beats Zhalgas Zhumagulov. He goes out there, beats Zhumagulov by split decision over in Jacksonville. It was unlike the other, you know, tough, close fights Zhumagulov has had in the past. I thought Van won the fight pretty decisively. They give him the nod by split decision. After that, Van goes out there and beats Kevin Borjas by unanimous decision as well. Goes up there, really wins with the striking, wins with the grappling as well. It's a good victory for Josh Van in that fight. And real quick, before I continue with this, again, I'm recording on an iPhone again tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but next week. We'll have the actual camera. I'll have my microphone back. Again, I'm just recording from home right now. I'll be back in the other setup. I'm going back tomorrow. So, but again, this is the last video in this setup. So again, normal videos coming back soon. But anyways, Bunes and Van here. This feels like the fight that Josh Van is going to go out there and win. I mean, you look at the odds. This fight was put together somewhat recently. Van's a -200 favorite. Bunes come back at you at +165. Originally, this was supposed to be Dennis Bondar versus Felipe Bunes. Instead, you get Josh Van instead. Van should go out here and really dominate. I really do think so. I think Van's going to win from the first minute on. I think it's going to be really one-sided. I think Van's the way better striker. I think Van's got way better conditioning. And as a whole, I just think Van is the better fighter. So give me Joshua Van. This is a guy training out of Houston, Texas. He is 14 years younger. 12 years younger than Felipe Bunes. Bunes 34, making his UFC debut. Van making the 3rd fight to the octagon at the age of 22. It's weird. Again, Van has had 2 fights in the UFC. They've both been fight nights with crowds, or fight events with crowds. Now you go to the UFC Apex in your 3rd fight when you're 2-0, opening off the card. Doesn't make that much sense, but give me Josh Van to win the fight. I'd like him to take it by unanimous decision. Our next fight, we've got the undefeated 6-0 Tom Nolan making his UFC debut after winning on the Contender Series, and he will be taking on He'll be taking on Nicolas Motta in this fight. For Nicolas Motta, this is a guy who is 13-5 in the UFC. And, you know, Motta has been in some fights. I think he's most known probably for that fight that he had against Jim Miller. Jim Miller will be on this card as well. That's how I kind of remember Nicolas Motta by. It's Motta's first fight in the UFC, and he comes out there and he gets knocked down in the first round. And now Motta's UFC run has been interesting as well because he comes in after that. He beats Cameron Van Camp, a guy who is no longer in the UFC. He loses to Manuel Torres, where he gets knocked out in the first round. And then he has the no contest against Trey Ogden, where it's a premature stoppage. It's interesting. I mean, what you going to do about it? Now, again, Motta now turns it around. He's going to get Tom Nolan. And Tom Nolan, and by the way, the Trey Ogden fight, he was losing. He was getting his ass beat. Like, he was well on his way to losing the fight. Now here he is taking on a guy in Tom Nolan, who's making his UFC debut. Nolan's 6-0, originally training out of Queensland, Australia. This is a guy who's coming off that knockout win in the Contender Series. He's been fighting in Eternal MMA. If you don't know what Eternal MMA is, it is probably the biggest promotion, I would say, in that oceanic region, of course, with New Zealand and with Australia. You're looking at Eternal MMA where you're going to get those best prospects. It's that and Hex, I believe. Yeah, Hex is the other big one out there, but Eternal, I believe that's where Jack Della Maddalena fought, or was Maddalena was either that or Hex. Tyson Pedro, I believe, fought in Eternal at one point. You've gotten some real good talent out of Eternal MMA, and that's where Tom Nolan is coming out of. His last fight, he beat Bogdan Grad. Grad's a guy who was, you know, boasting an 11-1 record, and then, you know, he goes out there and gets finished by Nolan. Nolan has got all the keys, honestly, to go out here and win this fight. I do think he does. He's a pretty sizable favorite, minus 200 for the UFC debuting fighter here. And I understand why people aren't high on Motta. Motta really has not looked good in the UFC so far, with the exception of beating Cameron Van Camp, a guy who's no longer in the UFC, and just, you know, the loss to Manuel Torres, the loss to Jim Miller. He was losing the Ogden fight as well. It's just tough. I would say it's tough if you're backing Motta in this fight. Again, Nolan looked good in his one fight so far in the UFC, on the Contender Series. He goes out there and picks up the win pretty decisively. I think the power is going to be a big advantage for Tom Nolan in this fight. Nicolas Motta, again, has been on the wrong end of some fights where he has gotten a finish so far, and Tom Nolan can definitely go out there and really put it on Nicolas Motta. Motta has lost 5 fights in his professional career. He is 13-5. All 5 of those losses have been by finish. One of them was by submission. Go all the way back, I believe, to 2013, yeah. And the others have been by knockout. Motta is chinny. He is there to be hit. He leaves his chin exposed, and he's definitely, you know, there's definitely a big opportunity for Tom Nolan to come out here and pick up the knockout victory. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I really do think so. I think, you know, Nolan's power is going to be huge in this one because, again, I just don't know if Motta's going to be able to stand through it. Again, I've seen this guy go out there and get knocked out before. Nolan's 23 years old. He's young. He's, you know, coming into this game. He's making his UFC debut. And it just feels like the type of fight that he's going to be able to go out there and win. You look at what, you know, you're getting the votes on Tapology, 92% going with Tom Nolan to 8% for Nicolas Motta. I am pretty big on Nolan to win this fight, and I don't think it really takes very long just because, again, I have not been impressed in the slightest of what we've seen out of Nicolas Motta so far in the UFC. I'm going to go Tom Nolan to pick up the victory. I think he gets it done by first round knockout. Next up, Weston Wilson gets a fight here against John Silva here. Silva's a guy who's coming off a huge win over Kevin Vallejos on the Contender Series earlier in 2023, winning the fight by unanimous decision, beating an undefeated guy to get his contract into the UFC. And Weston Wilson is 16-8. He is 0-1 in the UFC, and he was really an interesting signing. Weston Wilson's a guy who, if we're being honest with ourselves, kind of feels like Cameron Van Camp, kind of feels like Nicolas Motta. It's a guy the UFC is trying to kind of get out of there, you know, like, I don't know, because Wilson, again, was signed. I believe he was a last-second replacement to take on Joanderson Breathu. Breathu goes out there and knocks him out in the first round, as expected, right? That's how that fight goes. Wilson only lands 4 significant strikes in that fight, and now he gets a guy in John Silva who, you know, it looks all right on paper. You know, you've seen his fight against Vallejos where he goes out there and wins. He looks good in the fight. He goes the full 15. really dictates that fight. Silva's the one in charge of where the fight really ends up because he takes down Vallejos in that fight at one point. Doesn't really keep him down at, that much, but still, he literally has him down for 10 seconds, but still, it's more of a striking performance. And John Silva looks good. He wins 2 rounds in that fight. He picks up the victory. I just think a lot of fighters, especially in the UFC and especially in the featherweight division, can beat Weston Wilson. I don't think Weston Wilson's very good. I remember when the UFC signed this guy, and I was like, okay, he lost to Teruto Ishihara back in XMMA in 2022. He then went on to win 3 fights, but they were against guys who had a 9-19 record, a 4-3 record, and an 8-5 record. He really didn't beat anybody. He wins those fights. He runs into Jurandas and Brito. He loses. He was supposed to fight Gabriel Santos. Santos withdraws. Now we get Jean Silva instead, and it's the perfect opportunity for Silva to come into the UFC and win. I don't think he's the most impressive guy. I really don't think so. When you look at the record and you look at the body of work, the wins in 2023 against a 4-0 guy, 9-9 guy, then he beats Vallejos. Sure, he wins fights. Has he looked the best in doing so? I mean, again, against lower level competition, he has looked good. And he looks good in the win in the Contender Series. The guy he beat, undefeated fighter coming out of Argentina. I believe he was he a slight underdog going into that fight? Yeah, he's a, pretty plus 180 range underdog. Sure, looks good. They are setting him up with one of the better opportunities that they can give him in this featherweight division. Weston Wilson has not looked good in the UFC so far in his one fight, and I have not been overly impressed with what he did before the UFC. He's coming from the Tough Enough promotion, which again is not a promotion known for producing the best UFC fighters, and many UFC fighters at that. I think Jean Silva is going to win. I'm going to take the Brazilian, making his UFC debut at 27 years of age. Weston Wilson is about to turn 35. He's a Stephen Wonderboy Thompson product, training at Upstate Karate in Simpsonville, South Carolina. This is a Jean Silva victory if I've ever seen it. The karate is not going to work for Weston Wilson here. Silva's going to be able to close distance, fire off his big hooks, and he's going to be able to win the fight. So it's going to be Jean Silva to win his UFC debut. Coming out of the Fighting Nerds camp over in Sao Paulo, Brazil, going to be Jean Silva to win his UFC debut, and he's going to get it done by first round knockout. Now we've got a good one. We've got the undefeated Afghani fighter here in Farid Basharat, now coming out of Las Vegas, Nevada, and he's going to be taking on Taylor Lapilus in this fight. This is a good one because you look at what Lapilus was able to do in his last fight in the UFC. It's his return. He beats Callum Loughran in that one. He beats him by unanimous decision. And again, Taylor's first run in the UFC, he went 3-1. He loses one fight to Eric Perez, but he wins the other 3, and the UFC moves on. They go their separate ways. He comes back, wins fights in Aries FC, wins the Bantamweight Championship, gets re-signed to the UFC to go fight in France. And I think the UFC is supposed to go back to France, I believe sometime this spring. They say, no, you go fight in front of no fans in the UFC Apex. And he's taken on a very tough out in Farid Basharat because no one's been able to beat this tough out in Basharat just yet. Basharat is undefeated. He is 11 or 12-0. He's 11-0, and this is by far his toughest opponent, I think. But again, don't forget this guy just beat Damon Blackshear. And Damon Blackshear, a lot of people are high on Blackshear now because of his twister victory over Jose Johnson. He did come back and lose to Mario Bautista, who we're going to talk about later in this card, where that's an interesting fight. It's a close fight. Again, we'll talk about Bautista and Blackshear when we get on to Bautista's eventual fight against Ricky Simone on this card. But again, Basharat goes up there and he beats Damon Blackshear. UFC 285 main event, John Jones, Cyril Gane. Again, where is John Jones? He's still hurt, I guess. Tom Aspinall wants to fight. He's not going to be able to fight. They're going to say the best we can do is Cyril Gane for you, Tom Aspinall, because we have to have Stipe Miocic and John Jones. Stipe's willing to fight Tom Aspinall, it appears. Just have Stipe fight Aspinall while we're waiting, I guess. I don't know. The money fight I get is Jones, Miocic, but I think we know how that fight's going to go. Anyways, Farid Basharat, again, the guy's 3-0. He's able to beat Damon Blackshear on the ground. Blackshear is at least, he's very skilled on the ground. He's able to pull off a twister in a fight or in a UFC fight. Most guys can't pull that off in practice. Right? So he beats Blackshear, and then he goes over there and beats Clemson Rodriguez. He arm triangles him in the first round. Again, Basharat undefeated, 2-0 in the UFC, 11-0 professionally. Sure, the body of work outside the UFC wasn't the greatest, but again, don't judge a book by its cover. You get guys like this who come into the UFC and they fight well. The biggest example of this was Taila Santos. Taila Santos looked horrible outside the UFC, at least against the opponents she fought. She comes in the UFC and she almost beats Valentina Shevchenko. Now, she's out of the UFC at this point, which is weird. But anyways, freed Basharat 11-0, and he's getting a very tough out on Taylor Lapilus in this one. This is a very close fight. This is the toughest one to pick so far this year. I mean, I know there's only been 4 fights, but this is definitely a tough ask for both these guys, right? Lapilus defends home turf when he goes out there and beats Loughran. Callum Loughran went 2 for 11 on his takedowns in that fight. The Irish fighter goes in there, tries to play the whole villain role in France, and basically the fight was centered around, can Lapilus keep the fight on the feet? Because you know what Loughran's going to try to do. He's going to try to go out there. He's going to try to take down Lapilus. And he tried, and he did get him down in the second round, did get him down in the first round. But again, Lapilus did just enough on the feet to win those rounds. He was able to win the fight 2-1. I feel like the same thing's going to happen in this fight. Lapilus is going to be fighting off the takedowns of freed Basharat. Because you know that's what Basharat is going to bring. You know, coming off the huge win over Clinton Rodriguez, where he goes out there and just makes short work of him, where he submits him in the first round. The Damone Blackshear fight, where he goes out there and, you know, looks pretty good in 3 rounds. I don't think Basharat's going to get a submission if he does win this fight. I think this fight will go the distance on either side. I don't know if Lapilus is really able to put away Basharat on the feet, but I do think it's a very interesting stylistic matchup in this one. Because again, Lapilus is sort of fighting a better version of his last opponent in this one, because Basharat, the nickname's ferocious, but seriously, he is going to keep looking for that takedown. He is going to keep shooting for that takedown, and you know the skills he does possess once this fight does hit the mat. He's an extreme couture guy fighting out of Las Vegas, Nevada. I would be hard-pressed not to pick free Basharat in this fight, and that's what I'm going to go. I'm going to go free Basharat to win the fight. He is the favorite, -175, +145 on the other side coming for Taylor Lapilus. You look at the odds, or you look at the picks on Tapology, 82% going with Basharat, 18% going for Taylor Lapilus in this fight. Again, I have to take free Basharat in this fight. I think Basharat's wrestling, and I think Basharat's overall skill on the ground is going to be too much in this one. And again, I like Taylor Lapilus, and I think there's a chance Lapilus could win this fight too. But I think Basharat gets it done. I really do think so. We haven't seen anyone beat the guy just yet. Again, I think Basharat's able to do what Loughran wasn't able to do, and I think he's just able to do what Loughran did, but just 10 times better. I think he's able to keep Lapilus down. I think he's able to, you know, shoot for higher accuracy on his takedowns than what Loughran did against Taylor Lapilus. Give me free Basharat to win the fight. I feel pretty good about that one, even though I do think it is the toughest one to pick so far on the night. All right, our next one. Marcus McGhee will be getting Gaston Bolanos in this one. Bolanos, the 7-3 Peruvian fighter, I do believe. Yeah, he's from Peru. Again, Gaston Bolanos, I don't know if you remember when he first had his first fight in the UFC, when he fought Aaron Phillips. Really weird circumstances. This is a guy coming in from Bellator, but he had lost back-to-back fights in Bellator before beating Daniel Carey, and the UFC jumps on him and signs him. Now he's getting Marcus McGhee, a guy who has looked like a straight killer so far in the UFC. Sure, it's only been 2 fights, but his 2 fights in the UFC have been really impressive. He comes into the promotion, he beats Jerry Newsom by a second-round submission, and then he knocks out JP Buys. Now, okay, a lot of guys would have beat JP Buys. Originally, I was supposed to be Gaston Bolanos versus Marcus McGhee. Bolanos pulls out, JP Buys steps in on short notice, company guy, and Marcus McGhee knocks him out in the first round. That's expected, but McGhee hits hard. He's 33 years old. Again, he's an older guy who is just breaking into the promotion, but this guy he's a tough out. He's a really tough out, and a really tough ask for the dream killer in Gaston Bolanos in this one. You look at the odds, -325 for the favorite Marcus McGhee, +250 for the underdog and Gaston Bolanos. Yeah, again, it's a tough ask. It's a real tough ask for Gaston Bolanos in this fight, because I do think he's going to be overwhelmed with the power in this fight. Bolanos, again, this is a guy who struggled against Solo Hatley Jr. back in Bellator, a guy who was 7-2 at the time, a guy who's now 11-8 after, you know, leaving Bellator, losing to Aaron Pico. Like, he's, you know, Bolanos hasn't beat the best guys either. The Daniel Carey win, okay, he beats him by submission. Carey goes on to lose after that against a guy who's 10-6. He beats Aaron Phillips. Okay, Phillips is a UFC guy. Aaron Phillips is 0-4 in the UFC, and he had not fought in 3 years up until the Bolanos fight. The Gaston Bolanos fight just seems weird. It's, you know, the signing just seems weird, kind of like Felipe Bunes. But again, Bunes at least makes a little bit of sense because he is coming off winning the LFA championship. Bolanos was just an undercard guy in Bellator who wasn't all that great in Bellator either, who was coming off of losing 2 of 3. I still don't understand why they signed the guy, and now here he is against Marcus McGhee. They are definitely using Bolanos to boost McGhee's name and to continue McGhee's sort of rise. But again, McGhee's 33 years old. You're at a point in your career where you're coming into the UFC. Sure, you win twice in 2023. That's great. He makes his first appearance in 2023. He's on the Felipe Bunes undercard in LFA. He wins by knockout. So he goes 3-0 in mixed martial arts in 2023. But you're 33 years of age, you're coming into the UFC, it's time to start racking up those wins, and it's time to start, ascending up the ranks. Beating guys like JP Buys and Gaston Bolanos really isn't going to do that for you. I know he was originally scheduled to fight Bolanos, which is fine. But you beat JP Buys, it kind of feels like you should be fighting guys better than that. And I don't really know how much of it, an improvement Gaston Bolanos is from JP Buys. Sure, he will have a chin, and JP Buys doesn't have a chin, so that's why it is somewhat of an improvement in opponents. But honestly, it's not that high of a step up. I think Marcus McGhee really handles him in this fight. I don't think it's all that competitive. You look at Tapology, 91% going with Marcus McGhee, 51% of that 91% going by knockout, 24% of that 91% going by submission. I think it's going to be by knockout, and I don't think it's going to be all that competitive. I think Marcus McGhee goes out there and really dominates. First round knockout. Again, I go a lot of early finishes on these Apex cards because, again, there's no crowd. It's a small octagon. It's a weird environment for some of these guys. I think Marcus McGhee really goes out there and just dominates. I don't understand the signing of Gaston Bolanos. It's not like he's super young either. He's 31 years old. Yeah, Marcus McGhee goes out there and wins. I don't really have much else to say. The guy's got a lot of power. He is skilled on the ground, so if the fight does end up down there, you do have that to fall back on for Marcus McGhee. But I don't think he's going to really be in that much danger where he's going to need to go down. Again, I'm not impressed with Bolanos. Sure, he looked good in the fight against Aaron Phillips. But it's against Aaron Phillips, who has not won a fight in like 5 years. And who has not won yet in the UFC at all. So yeah, Marcus McGhee is going to win. I like that pick, and I feel pretty good about it. So on to the next one. Matthew Semelsberger, sent by the Jedi, is back coming off of his loss to Arlovski, and somehow, some way now, Matthew Semelsberger has lost 3 out of his last 4 fights. The only win being against Jake Matthews. Now, a lot of people thought he'd be Jeremiah Wells. That fight can really go either way. I think Semelsberger probably should have got the nod in that one. I had Wells to win, so I wasn't really too disappointed with the decision, but that's neither here or there. Semelsberger now has lost 3 of 4, and they're giving him Preston Parsons. Now, Preston Parsons is a guy who's 1-2 now in the UFC. He comes in on short notice. He takes on D-Rod, Daniel Rodriguez, still kind of COVID-y era, 2021. D-Rod goes out there and finishes him in the first round by knockout. And what did we know of Preston Parsons, and what do we still know of Preston Parsons? He's a jiu-jitsu guy. He's a guy who's going to look to grapple. I mean, his 1 win in the UFC, and really the fight after that against Trevin Giles, too, he tries to grapple Trevin Giles. Giles goes out there and wins the fight. That's the fight card, I believe, in San Antonio, Texas. Giles goes out there and outstrikes Preston Parsons, and that's how he wins. The Evan Elder Preston Parsons fight was all Preston Parsons. Parsons was the superior striker, and he was also the superior grappler as well in that fight. Now we get Parsons and Matthew Semelsberger. This is a fight to get Semelsberger back on the right track. At least it feels like that way. It just does. I know he loses to Medic. Medic's a tough out. It was a back-and-forth war. Salt Lake City up in the elevation. Medic wins the fight. Both those guys knock each other down. Medic gets him with a spinning back elbow in the 3rd round to win the fight. The Jeremiah Wells fight, I don't know how Jeremiah Wells wins a fight where he got knocked down twice in 2 separate rounds. Again, I'm not complaining because I picked Jeremiah Wells to win that fight, and that was on a card. The Pavlovich Blades card, which was probably my worst card of last year. But I don't know. They gave the win to Jeremiah Wells, and I was okay with it. But yeah, Semelsberger's only win out the last 4 is a really good win. It's the win over Jake Matthews where he just dominates. That's the last card of 2022. He knocks down Jake Matthews 3 times in that fight. He dominates. He takes him down 3 times as well. And Jake Matthews is no slump. He's no slouch. I don't know. Words aren't comprehending. I've recorded in about a month now. But seriously, he's no bad fighter. And Semelsberger goes out there and really handles him. The fight before that, Alex Morono, it's a fight in Dallas, Texas. He drops Morono. He loses the fight. Now, again, Semelsberger, that's what he's going to bring. He's going to bring the power. He is going to drop you. I've talked about this skid where he's lost 3 of 4. He's still knocked down his opponent every time in those 4 fights. Now you get a primary grappler in Preston Parsons, a guy who's going to look to take him down. Now, What Jeremiah Wells did fall back on that ended up winning him the fight in the judges' eyes was his wrestling, was his takedowns. He was able to avoid the pressure and the damage he was taking on the feet or getting pushed out in the feet, and we were talking about pressure. He was able to avoid that by taking down Matthew Semelsberger in that fight, which, again, that's how, credit to the guy who won the fight, but that's what Preston Parsons is going to try to do in this fight as well. However, I think you can get really good value for Matthew Semelsberger at minus 130 for this fight. I love the value for Semelsberger at this point. Again, it feels like a fight that he's really able to win. You look at the Tapology picks, 84% Semelsberger, 16% Parsons. Obviously, you're not backing your prediction based off that, off of other people's predictions. But again, it just shows, a lot of people confident in Semelsberger to pick up the victory in this fight. Because how does Preston Parsons win? Parsons takes him down and holds him down and controls him and looks for a submission. But again, Parsons has really only been able to do that once so far in the UFC, and he lost to Trevin Giles. I don't think Trevin Giles is honestly the greatest at this point of his career. I don't think he is, and Giles is still able to edge out a split decision victory. Parsons has beat Evan Elder. I think a lot of guys beat Evan Elder. As long as Semelsberger is able to stay off the fence and stay off his back, he should be able to win. The only guys to have real success grappling with them was Wells and AJ Fletcher. And now those aren't the best guys, but still, again, Semelsberger was able to do enough to win the Fletcher fight, not the Wells fight, even though we thought he won the Wells fight. The other fights he's lost, he's just been outstruck. Morono, Medic, he's not going to get outstruck by Preston Parsons, and I feel really good about it. So give me Matthew, Semi the Jedi, Semelsberger to win the fight. It's a fight to get him back on the winning track. Semelsberger is going to get into somewhat of a war with Preston Parsons on the feet. I think Parsons is going to know that he can't take down Semelsberger by the end of the first round. So then he says, got nothing else to do. Gonna get into a fist fight on the feet. I think Semelsberger is going to win eventually. He will find the knockout. Semi the Jedi, Matthew Semelsberger is going to win this one. I like him to take it by second round knockout. On to the heavyweight division. It's your featured prelim. It's the Pitbull, Andre Arlovski. Yes, he still fights, and he's going to be taking on Salsa Boy, Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Now, Andre Arlovski, unfortunately, has fell from the just above the low-level heavyweights. This is the low-level heavyweights, and this is where Andre Arlovski was. After losing to Marcos Rodrigo de Lima, which I don't think is a bad loss, I didn't see that one, right? I did, but I'm just saying, I can do away with that. That's fine. The Don'Tale Mayes loss, man, I don't know, that's bad. The Don'Tale Mayes loss is bad. It just is. It's just bad. He loses to Don'Tale Mayes. And now, is Mayes the best fighter? He's really not, because then Mayes runs into Rodrigo Nascimento and loses. And Mayes has lost to Augusto Sakai as well. It's not ideal. It's not ideal for Arlovski. I've been an Arlovski guy, and I've picked Andre Arlovski to beat these low-level heavyweights. Tanner Boser, Felipe Lins, Chase Sherman, Carlos Felipe, Jared Vandera, Jake Collier. Those are all low-level guys that Arlovski was able to beat. I thought he was going to be able to just edge out a victory against de Lima. And by the way, he'd win all of those by decision because Lord knows, again, Arlovski's power is gone. But he gets knocked out by Don'Tale Mayes in the second round. So, again, 2 years ago, pre-de Lima fight, I'd say, okay, Andre Arlovski wins a decision. Unfortunately now, I can't bring myself to take Andre Arlovski. I know I'm giving away the pick pretty early here, but again, just saw what Cortes-Acosta was able to do in the fight against Lucas Brzeski. Now, do I think Lucas Brzeski's the best? I don't think he is, but still, Acosta is able to knock him out in the first round. Now you get Acosta and Andre Arlovski. Salsa Boy's a minus 400 favorite. And I remember Cortes-Acosta's last fight in the Apex, I don't know if it was the de Lima fight or the Chase Sherman fight. I don't remember which one it was. But I think, was it the UNLV? I think it was the UNLV baseball team, I think. It might have been a team playing UNLV that week, but I believe it was the UNLV baseball team. And maybe it was the de Lima fight. Was it the de Lima fight? I don't know. Because that would have been college baseball season. Because the Sherman fight wouldn't have been. It was in November. So yeah, I think it was the de Lima fight. And they keep showing okay, because the UFC will play this backstory all the time. And they're going to say this every damn time, de Lima's going to throw a right hand. They're going to say, oh, he's throwing his fastball because, he's used to play baseball in the Dominican Republic. Because get it, the Dominicans have got really good baseball players. That's what they're going to say every single time. John Anik's going to, go to that 20 times. And I guarantee you John Anik's going to be on this call because he's not going to miss being on a UFC fight night after being away for 4 weeks. So again, John Anik's going to go to that a million times. Laura Sanko's going to go to it. Michael Bisping, even though he doesn't know what baseball is probably going to go for it too. Bisping's going to be, oh yeah, he's going to throw that football at him, because Bisping, again, maybe it's an eye thing. I don't know. Michael Bisping in American sports don't go well. Anyways, Cortes-Acosta, they're going to say he's going to throw that fastball a million times. But anyways, going back to my story, they literally pulled this. I think it's the UNLV baseball team. Cortes-Acosta lose to DeLima, but they keep showing the baseball team at UNLV like, yeah, go Acosta, because he used to play baseball. It's like I'm sure the guys are just cheering because they were at a fight, not just because they found out this Dominican dude who's a heavyweight who weighs 265 pounds used to play baseball back in the Dominican Republic. I don't know. But anyways, that's besides the point. I'm telling a story now. Cortes-Acosta is going to win the fight. He's the way better striker. It's just a matter of if he can get the finish. Because again, Cortes-Acosta has beat these lower level heavyweights too. I made the comparison that Cortes-Acosta is literally the new Andre Arlovski. He beats these lower level guys, but then loses to the better guys as well. He loses to Rodrigo de Lima, just like Arlovski did. Who did he beat? Vandera and Sherman, two guys Arlovski has beat. He beats Lucas Brzeski. Brzeski's a low level heavyweight. He's a guy that maybe Andre Arlovski will fight if Arlovski fights after this fight, because Brzeski's not very good. Let's just be honest with ourselves, guys. Brzeski goes 0-4. I forgot he's fighting Walter Walker in his next fight. He'll probably lose, and he'll probably be out the UFC. He's 0-4 in the promotion. He beat Dylan Potter on the Contender Series, and Dylan Potter's the guy who couldn't make it in the PFL. So, I mean, what are we doing, guys? The heavyweight division's so bad. Cortes-Acosta is going to win, because Arlovski's a shell of his former self. I love the Pitbull, but unfortunately, guys, he's 44 years old. It's time to hang it up. I'm sorry. He'll probably fight one more time after this, but it's time. It is time. Cortes-Acosta wins. I'm sorry. Arlovski's washed. First round knockout for Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Sometimes Cortes-Acosta, though, does get in these fights where he gets complacent and he doesn't go for the finish, and he just kind of feels good, just, staying on the outside, using his jab, throwing his ones and twos, and, he wins the fight, he ducks, he parries, and he wins. You might see that out of Cortes-Acosta here. I don't think it's going to happen. I really think he's going to go for it, and unfortunately, I think Arlovski's chin is gone, so that's why Cortes-Acosta is going to dominate this fight for however long it does last. Give me Salsa Boy. Remember, he played baseball at one point. Give me Waldo Cortes-Acosta to win the fight. On to our next one. On to the main card, Phil Hawes and Bruno Ferreira. Someone likely is going to get knocked out in this fight. This is a good one because, again, both of you guys have a lot of power. Now, Phil Hawes is coming off back-to-back losses. The guy has not won a fight since he tried to fight Daniel Cormier after beat Duran Win, which, honestly, I don't really blame Phil Hawes for getting mad. It was, if you look back at the Duran Win fight, he beats Duran Win. The moment he sees DC, he knows DC's guy is Duran Win. He tries to tell him, oh, why were you dodging me or whatever. Or no, not why were you dodging me. Why did you pick this fight? And DC says, why would he pick this fight? You saw what happened. Again, both those guys handled it well. I think they both, buried the hatchet after. It's fine. But Haas not won since. And now he gets a guy in Bruno Ferreira who, was on top of the world. He was on top of the world after he knocked out Gregory Rodriguez in Brazil. And then he comes in and he loses to Nursultan Ruzubiev. I'm sorry, I still don't know how to say that guy's name. He has not fought since. Anyways, Bruno Ferreira gets beat down pretty bad in that fight. And Nursultan, he's a guy who's training who fights out of Uzbekistan. He's supposed to fight Kyle Berhayo. I was excited for that fight in November. But anyways, the Uzbekistan fighter, this guy's good. Really, Nursultan is a very tough out. And he was able to go out there and he was able to dominate Bruno Ferreira. I wouldn't say dominate because the fight only lasted 107 seconds, but still, he gets knocked out, does Ferreira, everything turns. But again, this is a guy Nursultan, who's had so many professional fights. He's 30 years old. He trains out of Renzo Gracie in Philly. This guy is very good, and I want to see him fight again. Anyways, Ferreira, Phil Hawes, someone's getting knocked out. That's the way I see it. Phil Hawes has been used somewhat as a stepping stone for guys after he beat Duran Win. Actually, before the Duran Win fight as well. He's been used as a stepping stone. Chris Curtis, that was Chris Curtis's entry into the UFC, was beating Phil Hawes, because Curtis was coming in from the PFL and various other promotions. I believe fought ex-MMA. He comes in, first fight, he beats Phil Hawes. Phil Hawes beats Duran Win. Damn, that water went the wrong way. Anyways, he beats Duran Win. Sure, he's supposed to beat Duran Win. He loses to Roman Dolidze. Dolidze since then has now catapulted himself to being in UFC Fight Night main events. And then he loses to Ikram Alaskarov in Alaskarov's first fight in the UFC, which, again, credit to Phil Hawes. Damn, that water went the wrong way. For taking the fight, because a lot of guys don't want to fight Ikram Alaskarov. You saw what Ikram Alaskarov was able to do to Warley Alves. The guy's really good. Askarav knocks him out in the first round. They were willing to book Askarav against Paulo Costa at one point. That's how highly the UFC thinks of Ikram Askarav, and Phil Hawes just ran into the wrong guy. But again, damn, this water is messing me up. He has ran into the wrong guy a lot. He just has. Curtis, Dolidze, Askarav. Is Bruno Ferreira the wrong guy again for Phil Hawes? That's the question. That's the question here. Because Bruno Ferreira, he's got the nickname Hulk for a reason. This guy throws very hard. He throws, like, seriously, he does not give a damn. He is going to throw as hard as he can, and he'll try to win the fight. The Gregory Rodriguez fight was back and forth for however long it did last. For the 4 minutes it lasted, it was somewhat back and forth until Ferreira found the knockout and boom, put Rodriguez back. Or put Rodriguez's, had him laying, face up to the canvas. Like, it was bad. Or face up to the lights, whatever. Like, it was a brutal knockout for Ferreira in Brazil, and then he comes back and he loses in the first round by first-round knockout. This is really interesting. It is. Phil Hawes is a Jake Paul guy, I think, right? He's Jake Paul's guy. I believe he is. Is he Jake Paul? I think he's, yeah. Is he Jake Paul's guy? No, he's Dylan Dennis's guy. I think he's Dylan Dennis's guy. But, like, it's a Killcliff FC guy. He's 35, though. Phil Hawes is getting up there. Bruno Ferreira, he's got knockout power. You look at what Phil Hawes is able to do before this, little skid. Kyle Dawkins win, Nasruddin Imavov win looks so good. Malkoun win. Like, he comes into the UFC, he's 3-0, he beats Kyle Dawkins, he gets Chris Curtis, he's in the rankings with that fight and he loses, and he hasn't been the same guy since. I think Phil Hawes is all around, though, a better striker than Bruno Ferreira. If he doesn't get caught, and he plays this fight smart, and he doesn't expose himself to getting hit with a big shot, I actually do think Phil Hawes is able to win the fight. I know, again, Phil Hawes does not look good. I'm taking the underdog. It's the first underdog I've taken. I haven't taken any so far because, honestly, be honest with me, where is the underdog spot that you like so far on this card? There really isn't one. Lapis is the only one I would consider. I wouldn't consider Preston Parsons, even though the odds are really close. This is the first underdog that is very playable in my opinion, and of course, I only pick winners. I'm picking Phil Hawes. I think Phil Hawes is able to wait, and I think he's going to slightly expose the striking game in Bruno Ferreira. Ferreira keeps his head up. Ferreira is going to be in there for a fist fight and for a firefight. I think Hawes is able to pick his spots. I think Hawes is able to win. I think he's got to be cautious. I know Hawes does kind of tire towards the end of fights, but I think Ferreira, if you do get him at the end of 15, I think he will tire as well. He's a very, built guy who doesn't really, again, I haven't seen him in a 15-minute environment because I don't think he's ever gone 15 minutes in his career. So I think if Phil Hawes fights this fight smart, he wins. If he doesn't fight this fight smart, he's not going to be in the UFC anymore. So it's up to him. He's got to fight this fight smart. He's got to get out that first round with Bruno Ferreira. He's got to drag this into the second and the third, and he's got to be conditioned right. He's got to be conditioned right because we've seen Phil Hawes not be conditioned right before. If he's able to fight this fight smart, Hawes is able to win. I think Phil Hawes is able to pick up the victory. I'm going to take Phil Hawes to win by late second round TKO. Again, I think Ferreira is a little overhyped because he just caught a very, somewhat chinny guy in Gregory Rodriguez. Taking Phil Hawes. I think Phil Hawes wins, taking the first underdog so far on the card. On to our next one. It's a good one. Ricky Simón, Mario Bautista. Very good fight here in the bantamweight division. It probably should be a little higher on the card, but I understand why they want Jim Miller higher on this card. There's a reason Jim Miller is where he is in this card. But anyways, Mario Bautista is coming off of a win on a UFC pay-per-view. The win over Damon Blackshear was a win on the UFC pay-per-view. Beats him by unanimous decision. Now, I understand why people thought Damon Blackshear won the fight. You look at that fight, you watch it back. Damon Blackshear fights the fight well. He just does. You can make the case. You can easily make the case Damon Blackshear wins the first 2 rounds and wins the fight. You can easily make it. The second round is the one you give to Bautista. I think Damon Blackshear won. I picked Bautista to win the fight, so I wasn't complaining. But watching it live and watching it again, I think Damon Blackshear won the fight. That is neither here or there, though. That's not what we're here to discuss. The water messed me up last time. I'm gonna try again, but okay, I was able to wash that down. Oh, thank goodness. Now Batista's in a fight against a very tough out in Ricky Simón. Because Batista goes from beating guys like Benito Lopez, Guido Canetti, Brian Kelleher, Jay Perrin. Damon Blackshear is a very tough guy who's on a different level than those other guys, but still he goes from fighting those guys to fighting a legitimate top 10, top 15 guy in Ricky Simón. A guy who has only lost to Song Yadong in the last 5 years. Other than that, it's a loss to Rob Font and a loss in Sacramento to Uriah Faber. Those are his only losses in the UFC. This is a guy who's beat Merab Dvalishvili before. Controversial stoppage and all. This guy who's beat Merab Dvalishvili before. He's beat Jack Shore. He's beat Rafael Assunção. He's beat Ray Borg. Still decent Ray Borg back in 2020, right? It's a very tough out. I know he lost to Song Yadong in a main event, but you know what? Song Yadong's going to be fighting Piotr Jan, where if he wins, Song Yadong could definitely be next in line for a world championship opportunity. Ricky Simón is a high-level fighter. I know Mario Bautista is good. He's getting there. He's 30 years old. His two losses are Trevin Jones and Corey Sandhagen. But this just feels like too much. This feels like a levels fight to me. Ricky Simón, I think, is just all around better than Mario Bautista. I think he is. He's been in the main event environment before. He's fought the top-level guys. I think he's able to dominate the wrestling here. I saw Damon Blackshear have a very good first round against Mario Bautista, and then followed that by winning the second round by outstriking Mario Bautista. I think Ricky Simón's better than Damon Blackshear, and I think Damon Blackshear maybe should have had that decision. Well, Ricky Simón probably won't make it that close, and Ricky Simón will probably dominate. Only minus 150 for Ricky Simón feels kind of criminal here, I'm not going to lie. I really think this is a good look for Ricky Simón. I don't think this fight is very close. I don't think it is. I think Simón wins an easy 30-27 decision. I think Simón beats him on the feet, and Simón beats him on the ground as well. I think Simón, I don't even think this fight's really going to be much on the feet. I think it's going to be much of just a grappling, Simón just wearing out Mario Bautista on the ground. I know Bautista's got submissions. I know he can throw stuff up off his back, but man, I don't think Simón's going to be caught in those. Simón is too good defensively on the ground to get caught in a submission like that. The guy has never been submitted in the UFC. He's usually the one pulling off the submissions himself. It's just a very tough ask for Mario Bautista. The guys who've been able to beat Ricky Simón are guys who are able to keep him standing and just outstriking him, and the guys who are able to outstrike him, right? Uriah Faber knocked him out. Rob Font was able to have success on the feet. Song Yadong was able to have success on the feet where he knocked him out in the 5th round. Other than that, no one has beat Ricky Simón yet. Other than those guys, Mario Bautista just, to me, doesn't have the style to beat Simón. I really think when you look at this fight, this is all Ricky Simón. Everything points to Simón winning the fight. I know MMA sometimes doesn't go the way you think it's gonna go, but I don't know, unless I'm missing something here, which, again, if I am, tell me in the comments. I really like Ricky Simón to win the fight at minus 150. Again, it feels like a really good line, a line that I think is gonna end up at minus 200 by the end of the week. But give me Ricky Simón to pull off the win. I think I don't think it's all that competitive. 30-27 Ricky Simón. I think he finds a lot of success on the ground. Simón picks up the victory. On to our next one. Jim Miller, Gabriel Benitez. I said earlier on, there's a reason this fight is in this spot. It's because Jim Miller needs, wanted to fight before UFC 300. He didn't want to wait that long. Now, Jim Miller's an underdog in this fight, which I don't understand. I don't know what people are looking at. Gabriel Benitez, I know that both these guys are older. Jim Miller's 40, Benitez is 35. Benitez is an AKA guy, which I feel like is a dying breed at this point because not a lot of guys come out of AKA anymore. Again, when I was, earlier in my life, it was Kane, Rockhold, Habib, King Mo, DC, all these guys coming out from AKA. I know some of the Dagestani guys still cross-train there, but it's just, AKA is not the gym it once was. I've been to AKA before, it doesn't have the same vibe, and it doesn't feel the same, at least now. They just don't have the same level of fighters. Benitez is still an AKA guy. I don't know what people are looking at. I don't know why the line has him as a favorite here. He beat Charlie Ontiveros' last fight. Well, everyone has beat Charlie Ontiveros in the UFC. He went 0-3 in the promotion and probably shouldn't have been there in the first place. He was just there to take on Kevin Holland on short notice. And Benitez beats him, sure, but lose to Onama, that's fine. Onama's good. He loses to Billy Quarantillo. He loses to Onama. Okay, fine. Those two guys are good. Beats Justin James. James is out of the UFC. Loses to Omar Morales. Lost to Sodiq Yusuff. How does Mowgli Benitez beat Jim Miller? He knocks him out? I guess. Jim Miller keeps looking good. He's coming off a win against, Jesse Butler, who shouldn't really be in there with Jim Miller, and just... Again, it's kind of just a fight to kind of stat pad on Jim Miller's career at this point, honestly. It kind of is. It was to get him his 25th win. It was supposed to be Jared Gordon, right? So, again, I thought he was going to be Jared Gordon. I thought Jared Gordon on short notice, chinny. you know, after not short notice, but it was a quick turnaround after the that's a pitcher on the Dodgers. Bobby Green knockout, or, you know, the one where Green headbutted him and Gordon had the no contest. So it was a quick turnaround. I was like, all right, Jim Miller is going to be able to win this fight. It doesn't happen. He gets Jesse Butler instead. Obviously, he beats the mustache man, Jesse Butler. He knocks him out in 23 seconds. Butler, is he still in the UFC? I think he is. Or did he get cut? I don't know, because he dropped out of a fight against Jekka in November. But yeah, Miller's only loss like recently is Alexander Hernandez. And Hernandez is still pretty decent. And he fought that fight really close too. Other than that, it's the Joe Solecki loss in 2021, Vince Pichel in 2020. Like, the run Miller's gone on. Eric Gonzalez isn't great, but still he beats these guys. Like, and again, Benitez literally fits the bill of the guys that Jim Miller's able to beat at this point of his career, right? Eric Gonzalez knocks him out in the second round, knocks out Nicolas Motta in the second round, submits Cowboy in the second round, loses Alexander Hernandez, beats Jesse Butler. Jim Miller is not losing to Mowgli Benitez. Right now, Jim Miller is a underdog, plus 105. Hammer that line. Jim Miller is not losing. Jim Miller is going to knock out Gabriel Mowgli Benitez in the second round. He's just going to. I know Benitez has got a chin on him. I know he's tough, but man, the guy's been knocked out 4 times. He's been knocked. His 2 losses, he got knocked out. Two most recent losses. TKO against Onama, sure, TKO. TKO against Corntillo, fine. Jim Miller's got to find that chin. At this point of his career, again, Jim Miller has become a headhunter. And he's going to go out there and he's going to knock out Gabriel Mowgli Benitez. Second round knockout for Jim Miller. Put him on UFC 300. He's been on UFC 100. He's been on UFC 200. He's got to be on this card. He fought Takanari Gomi at UFC 200. I don't remember who he fought at UFC 100. It was Mac Danzig. I don't even know who that is, I'll be honest. Not really my timeline. Jim Miller, the fight's Tony Ferguson. It's Tony Ferguson, loser goes home. No, actually, Jim Miller retires, he should stick around. But, like, it's Tony Ferguson's retirement fight. I don't think Jim Miller should retire. Like, seriously, the guy's been that good. Like, there's no point in him to retire yet. He can still keep racking up these wins and just, you know, keep setting that, you know, that goal higher for guys who are trying to break the UFC wins record and fights record at that too. So yeah, Jim Miller is going to win this fight. He's going to beat Gabriel Mowgli Benitez, and then he should fight Tony Ferguson because UFC's not going to cut you. They are not going to cut Tony Ferguson, and I've made the case they shouldn't. And okay, I think Tony Ferguson should be fighting a guy like Jordan Levitt next. Honestly, that's what I want to see Tony Ferguson do next, because that's a fight that he can win. If he can't truly beat Jordan Levitt, cut him. Jim Miller is a guy where you feel like, okay, if you lose to Jim Miller, can you really cut him then? Because my problem, and I've said this before at Tony Ferguson, he loses, you got to keep him around because you know the guy's not going to retire. So for his own good, you might as well keep him around and have him fight lower level guys. Because if not, he's going to go to the PFL, and then you're going to go see him fight Clay Collard, and you're going to go see him get his head punched in for 15 minutes or 15 probably minutes. Like, you rather him just stick around, or they're going to have him fight Shane Burgos and he's going to go get killed. Or now with Bellator, they're going to have him fight AJ McGhee and he's going to get killed. Like, it's just not ideal. Not ideal. Jim Miller's going to he'll knock out Tony Ferguson, but he's also going to knock out Gabriel Benitez. Jim Miller, second round knockout. On it to the co-main event in the evening. Mateus Nicolau and Manel Kape. It is a rematch in the flyweight division. It's not a title eliminator because the winner's not going to fight for the title, but it feels like a fight where the winner of this fight is definitely going to be, you know, in a fight where then they can fight for the belt. Now, I don't believe Kai Kara-France is booked, right? I don't think he is. I need to check this, but I don't think Kai Kara-France has a fight, right? He better not. Yeah, he doesn't. Okay, so I guess he couldn't make this fight with Manel Kape, but again, Eugene Behrman's comment about guys pulling out of fights with the Dricus du Plessis comment has aged so horribly because so many of those guys have pulled out of fights. Carlos Ulberg just pulled out of his fight against Dominic Reyes. You know, Kai Kara-France pulled out the fight against Manel Kape. Kape had, you know, his words to say against, CKB and Kai Kara-France at that, and Israel Adesanya. I'm not going to repeat that word because then I get taken off this platform. But yeah, you know, Manel Kape has said some things, and he has no filter on Twitter either. He has no filter in general. But anyways, Manel Kape last fight, UFC 293, beats a pretty unknown guy in Felipe dos Santos, does what he needs to do, beats him by decision, wins all 15 minutes. Sure, good win. Okay, now Mateus Nicolau. Now, if you remember when Manel Kape came into the UFC, nicknamed Starboy, I was always high on Manel Kape. I knew him from Ryzen. He beat Kaya Skura, comes into the UFC. He's the backup for Davison Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno, I believe. He's the backup for that fight. Of course, you know, he doesn't need to fill in. Comes in, fights the now champion Alexandre Pantoja in his first fight. Loses by unanimous decision. That's fine. Then it drops the fight by split decision to Matheus Nicolau. Now, he did not lose that fight. He did not lose that fight at all. Manel Kape really, like, you go back, you look at that fight. Nicolau wins the first. He does not win the second or the third. I don't know how you score either the second or the third round for Matheus Nicolau. The first round is horrible. If you go back and watch that fight, trust me when I'm telling you, nothing happens in the first round other than a Matheus Nicolau takedown. That's about it. Like, you don't need to watch the first round. Nicolau won. Watch 2 and 3. Manel Kape wins those 2 rounds. Manel Kape should have won that fight. Now, it really pushed him back in his, momentum with the UFC, but then he goes on, beats Ode Osborne, knocks Osborne out, Picasso, knocks out Zhagulescu Magulov, wins a decision against David Dvorak, beats Felipe dos Santos in the fight in the night performance, beats him by unanimous decision, knocks down dos Santos in that fight as well. Every fight in the Manel Kape winning streak, he has gotten a knockdown. Osborne, Zhumagulov, Dvorak, and dos Santos. Something that didn't happen in his first 2 fights where he loses to Pantoja and to Nicolau. Manel Kape should win this fight. And I don't think it's going to go the 15 minutes. I think Manel Kape's a so much better fighter than what we saw in 2021 when he was first coming into the promotion and fighting guys like Pantoja and Nicolau. I think he's so much better than that. Manel Kape, his ceiling in this division is the world champion. There's not many guys I would say truly like, okay, I think he's going to win the championship someday. I think Manel Kape at some point in time is going to be the world champion. I think he's going to be. I think Pantoja is going to be that champion for a while. I think Pantoja will beat the winner of Amir Albazi and Brandon Moreno. But when he gets to Manel Kape, that's the fight I'll be scared for Alexandre Pantoja. Like, Brandon Royval gave Pantoja a run for his money. He did, and I think Royval is going to be around for a long time, too. And I think Royval will... I don't think that's the last we have seen Royval in a title fight. I think we will see him back at, some sort of a title fight in the future. Because I do really like Royval. I think he's a good fighter. He needs to work on his ground game, but yeah. Again, Royval had Pantoja in some spots in that fight in the 5th round. Anyways, Manel Kape is a guy who has got championship caliber fight. He's a championship contending fighter in the future, very near future. He's going to go out there and beat Matheus Nicolau. This fight's not going to go very long. It's going to be a first-round knockout for Manel Kape. I haven't even talked about Matheus Nicolau. Again, it's a rematch. Nicolau is coming off of a first-round knockout loss to Brandon Royval. I know he's looked good prior to that. Like, legitimately, beats Matt Schnelly, beats Dvorak, beats Tim Elliott, beats Manel Kape. The second run in the UFC was good. Has been good for Nicolau. He's 5-1 or 4-1 in the second run. But this is a so much different Manel Kape than what you saw in 2021. It's a very different guy. It's such a different fighter. Manel Kape's going to go out there and just beat the brakes off him. First round knockout. I don't think Nicolau's ready for this power and ready for what Manel Kape has. Manel Kape has a lot of anger and he's got a lot of anger in his heart right now. He's going to take out the CKB hate he has on Matheus Nicolau. Maybe he'll call him what he called Kai Kara-France. Manel Kape, first round knockout. My goodness. This guy, again, give me him and Kai Kara-France, and then he can go fight for a world championship if he's not fighting for a world championship after his win over Nicolau. On to the main event, the rematch. Johnny Walker, Magomed Ankalaev. It is a rematch from Fight Island, Abu Dhabi, UFC 294, Mahashev Volkanovski 2. Obviously, that fight ends with, a no contest in the first round. It is a accidental illegal knee. That's what they're calling it. Ankalaev knees Johnny Walker in the head while Walker was down. Down to pony, you can't knee him. It's a no contest, sure. He didn't mean to do it, I guess. I don't know, but he still did it. So now you get the rematch. Now, again, nothing really, crazy happened in that first fight. Ankalaev takes him down, sure, and Walker's working his way back up, and that's when Ankalaev knees him. So, nothing crazy to report back from that first fight. I'll be honest, I picked Johnny Walker in the first fight. I did. But Ankalaev was able to get the takedown, so that kind of changes a little bit for me. I don't know. I think I don't usually do this because usually when there's rematches and nothing really changed from the first fight, I just go with the same pick I had. But I don't know why I'm leaning more towards Ankalaev in this rematch. I am. I think it was kind of a, I don't know. I wouldn't say a biased pick of why I went with Ankalaev the last time, or I went with Johnny Walker the last time. But I was like, okay, Ankalaev had the draw against Jan Blachowicz. He could have won the fight, but he, was getting beat on the feet, and that's why I do think that Walker has a chance if Walker is able to successfully use those leg kicks that Jan Blachowicz had so much success with at UFC 282 in December of 2022, right? And like Ankalaev for the whole thing where he's saying, like, I don't know if I'm going to fight again. I don't know if I can fight for this promotion where, again, the UFC is not the one who picks, they aren't the ones who pick the judges. Now, Ankalaev is back in Las Vegas. That's where he had that whole thing against Blachowicz where he, you know, called out the judges or whatnot. I thought it was a draw. I could see the draw. Like, okay. I can see the draw or the win for Ankalaev. The draw makes total sense for me. Ankalaev's got to fight in Las Vegas again, which is going to be the same athletic commission. It's Nevada. But, like, I don't really think he cares. I'm gonna go Magomed Ankalaev to win. I can't take Johnny Walker. Yeah, it's a 5-round fight now too. It's a 5-round fight. Ankalaev is way more, you know, he's way more conditioned for a 5-round fight than Johnny Walker is. I feel a lot more confident in Magomed Ankalaev winning a 5-round fight than Johnny Walker. Now, like, again, these guys know that there's more than 15 minutes in this fight. They know that this fight's going to go longer. I think Ankalaev will win. In a fight like this, I think Magomed does pick up the victory. We have seen both these guys in, you know, 25-minute fights before. We've seen Johnny Walker in a main event. 2 of them. Lost to Thiago Santos. Lost to Jamal Hill. You know, the Santos fight did go the full 25 and he lost it by decision. Do I think this one goes the full 25? Honestly, I think it does, actually, because I think Ankalaev's going to be very wrestle-heavy in this fight. I think he's going to, you know, see that, all right, he was able to get the takedown in the first fight. If he's able to drag, you know, Walker back down at those points where Walker is trying to get back up, then that's all the success he can have. That's all the success he really needs to have. So I think with that, I think Ankalaev is actually going to win a decision. It might not be like the craziest and the, you know, the most exciting pick I can make here, but I think the wrestling is going to play a big part in this fight. I think that's going to be one of the main things Ankalaev will look to do. I think Johnny Walker, if you look at this fight strategically for Magomed Ankalaev, why would you allow Johnny Walker to, like, why would you give the guy a chance in his best, you know, his best asset in this fight, which is the striking? You get rid of that, you minimize that, you look to wrestle, you really make it hard on Johnny Walker to win this fight, and you also try to drag him deep into this 5-round fight, which, again, the first fight was not a 5-round fight. So, again, I've seen Ankalaev, as bad as he did look early in the Jan Blachowicz World Championship fight, as he did look bad early in that fight, he did go into the 4th and 5th round, he did dominate those championship rounds. So I think Ankalaev knows he can get the fight deep, and he knows he can get this fight deep into the fight, and he can win. Again, I've seen him in a 5-round fight against Thiago Santos before, which I remember I brought this up when I picked Johnny Walker. Okay, Santos did well striking against Magomed Ankalaev. He really did. You can make the case that, honestly, Thiago Santos won the fight. You can make the case 1-2-3 Thiago Santos. Maybe he does beat Magomed. I thought Ankalaev won 3-2. I went 3-4-5 Ankalaev. I think that's a fair point too. But honestly, I can see the win for Thiago Santos in that fight. Like, both these guys share a common opponent in Santos. And that's why I was like, okay, maybe Walker can win. And I do think Walker can still win. But I think the 25-minute environment really favors Ankalaev because he's better paced for this 25-minute fight. In a full-out sprint, which is a 15-minute fight, it does favor Johnny Walker, and that's why I did pick Johnny Walker the first time. In a 25-minute environment, in a 25-minute atmosphere, I think Ankalaev is the better fighter with these circumstances, and I think Magomed Ankalaev is going to win. Give me Ankalaev to pick up the victory. I think he's going to take it by unanimous decision. I think he will wrestle a lot. I think he will strike when he needs to, but I think it's going to be a wrestling-heavy approach, and that wrestling-heavy approach is going to win Magomed Ankalaev this fight. Ankalaev is going to pick up the victory in the first UFC main event of 2024. And folks, thank you all for watching our UFC Fight Night predictions with Magomed Ankalaev and Johnny Walker's rematch in the main event, again, from the UFC Apex. But we'll be back next week from the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, main event middleweight championship of the world. Of course, Dricus du Plessis gets his championship opportunity against one Sean Strickland. So, folks, thank you all for watching. Make sure that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video. Make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. Again, normal format coming back next week for UFC 297, the pay-per-view. And again, looking to post a lot more here on the channel in 2024. So stay on the look and stay tuned for that. So, thanks again for watching, and Mamba forever.